Tens of thousands of British citizens are stranded around the world as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, with countries closing borders and restricting the movement of people. The Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has announced plans to bring them home, but says the UK hasn't faced a challenge on this scale in recent memory. The government will spend £75 million on a rescue mission, including chartering flights where no commercial ones are available. Here's Caroline Hawley.
This is one of the rescue planes sent to Peru to bring stranded British tourists home. By the end of tomorrow, with specially chartered flights, the government hopes to have about 1,000 people back on UK soil. More such flights to other countries will now follow.
So my name's Freddie, and I'm Claire.
Look at the smiles on these two junior doctors. They're heading home from a public health research project in Peru to rejoin the NHS.
And how much of a relief is that going to be for you?
A massive relief. We're so grateful that it's been organised, so thank you. I think there's been a lot of frustration from people in Peru that there hasn't been so much communication and things have taken a lot of time, but now things are happening. I think everyone's just very relieved and very grateful that we're coming home.
In Lima, no space for social distancing as British travellers queue up to get on the flights. Peru is in a state of emergency and tourists have had to make long and difficult journeys to the capital. And not everyone has made it. We were sent this footage by a British woman who'd been staying at a hostel where others were ill with coronavirus. She's now been taken out by the Peruvian authorities, disinfected and isolated in another hotel.
They've just told us that if we leave the hotel room at all, that we'll be arrested. All the repatriation flights that have gone, we've unfortunately missed. We're hoping now that the embassy in Lima can obviously focus on the situation in Parawan hostel and obviously get all the British nationals out safe and get us all home.
It's a week since the Foreign Office advised all British tourists abroad to head home, and this is the command centre of a huge global operation to help people come back. Across oceans and continents, British tourists are desperate to be repatriated, and there's been criticism of the Foreign Office for not doing enough. But the Foreign Secretary says he's spoken to dozens of his counterparts to urge them to keep their airspace open and allow UK citizens out.
Commercial options are still available. Don't wait. Don't run the risk of getting stranded. The airlines are standing by to help you. Please book your tickets as soon as possible. Where commercial flights are no longer running, the government will provide the necessary financial support for special charter flights to bring UK nationals back home.
From retired passengers on cruise ships to young backpackers, there are hundreds of thousands of British people stuck abroad right now. The task of bringing them home has no precedent. Caroline Hawley, BBC News.
EasyJet has grounded its entire fleet as the aviation industry struggles to cope with the pandemic. The budget airline said it had made the move due to the unprecedented travel restrictions imposed by governments globally. The budget airline says its staff will be paid under the government job retention scheme. Bright House, the biggest rent-to-own operator in the UK, has collapsed. The business had been struggling due to an influx of compensation claims for selling to people who couldn't pay. Bright House says customers should continue to make the monthly payments required to keep their household goods, with administrators now acting as the collecting agent. Prince Charles is out of self-isolation following his diagnosis of coronavirus. The 71-year-old prince spent 7 days self-isolating in Scotland after testing positive and displaying mild symptoms. The Duchess of Cornwall tested negative for the virus but will self-isolate until the end of the week. Coronavirus attacks your lungs, with the sickest patients needing to be put on ventilators where a machine breathes for you. The NHS has 8,000 ventilators but predicts it will need many more. Engineers at University College London have been working on a new breathing aid that could mean fewer ventilators are required and that could keep people out of intensive care. It's already been approved for use and is now being tested at 4 London hospitals, as our medical correspondent Fergus Walsh explains.
For the very sickest COVID-19 patients, as in this intensive care unit in Italy, a mechanical ventilator offers the best chance of survival. It takes over the job of breathing, giving the lungs a chance to recover. Patients on ventilators need to be sedated and they require expert staff. The NHS has around 8,000 of them. It's planning to acquire another 8,000 from suppliers in the coming weeks. but it's estimated up to 30,000 could be needed at the peak of any outbreak here. This doctor spoke to us just after coming off shift in intensive care.
And I think it's encouraging that from the government they've said that they would try and find 30,000 ventilators. I think that it looks as if less than a third of those might be available within the next few weeks, when I think this epidemic will peak in the UK.
The government admitted a communication confusion after the UK failed to join an EU scheme to source extra ventilators, but denied the NHS had been disadvantaged. By contrast, this new device has been approved. Known as continuous positive airway pressure, or CPAP, they're already used in the NHS, but are in short supply. So a team at University College London, working with Mercedes Formula One, devised a new one.
Normally medical device development would take years, and in this instance we've been able to do it in days.
University College London Hospital, which demonstrated the device, is now using it to treat patients with coronavirus.
I sincerely think it may actually save many lives by preventing patients from needing to go onto a ventilator, and again saving that vital resource for the very, very severely ill.
This is a great example of how the NHS, universities and industry are working together at extraordinary pace to meet the challenge posed by coronavirus. If the trials of this device go well, then Mercedes Formula One says it can produce up to 1,000 of these a day. In Italy, around half of COVID-19 patients on CPAP did not need intensive care, so the new device could greatly ease pressure on the NHS. Fergus, Walsh, BBC News.